Take two. Hi! Hello, and welcome to your yoga class. My name is Jenny, and this is a restore practice. So props can come in handy, and we are going to, well, I'll show you one way of one pose that we're going to get into that's really nice to have a prop, some sort of, I've got a bolster, that's what works best, but if you don't have one of these, you can use some cushions, pillows, or rolled, like a bigger blanket rolled up. So track down something like that. Other props that can be nice, not necessary, are blocks or something similar, like books or a stack of books, something close to this kind of shape and support, just to give sometimes a little lift or again a little support. And then blankets are nice as well, different sizes. You can lay one out for a little extra cushion, especially if the floor that you're on is a little harder. You also may want one to wrap up in Shavasana, or again, we can use it as a little lift, a little cushion. So take some time at your home to gather some props. Again, finding something that we can use, kind of like a bolster, cushion, stack of pillows, something like that. And we're going to be getting into the hips and low back tonight. So we're going to start in a child's pose. So take your time to get there. And we're going to come to hands and knees. And even, definitely if you have sensitive knees, double up on the mat or kneel on a blanket. But even if you don't, you might want to consider doing it just to save your knees while you got them. Your future knees will thank you. But yeah, so then for the child's pose, we're going to just simply shift the hips back towards the heels. And if it feels good, having the heels in line with the knees, toes pointed down as much as possible. And then arms can spread out overhead as you lower the head and chest down towards the earth. Now this is a deep bend in the knees, so if that's not feeling awesome, one thing that you can do is take a blanket and roll it up, or take some sort of cushion or pillows or something and place them across the calves, so that as you lean back, the hips, find that little cushion there, and as you lower down, it's not quite as extreme of a bend. You could also keep the hips raised without the blanket there, and come down into more of a puppy pose. This is going to get a little more into the shoulders. So the reason we're starting again in child's pose is to kind of gradually start to open up through the hips. So for right now, you're probably not feeling too much of a stretch or an opening in the actual hips, but you might be getting a little bit of a release in the hip flexors. And then as we continue to hold this, if it feels good for you, nice and gradually, we're just going to start to walk the knees out. So take some time before we start to move the knees. Just take some time to really settle in. Allowing yourself to open up through the back side of the body. The head and chest releasing down towards the earth. And it's okay if the head doesn't touch. But if it doesn't, and that's straining through the neck, then bring in, folded up blanket, a pillow, or even your block to just fill in that space. Bring the ground a little bit closer so that you can release the head all the way down. And start to focus on the breath. You may have already started to be aware of the breath if you're trying to take some deeper belly breathing, deep breaths into the belly. You're noticing that your belly may be hitting the thighs. It may be a little harder to get that full deep breath. So just kind of start to work with that, starting to notice the breath, deepen the breath, and trying to take those breaths into the belly. And that physical sensation can be part of what anchors you here in your practice. So starting to find the breath. Feeling the rise and fall of the belly against the legs. And you can also play with Ujjayi breathing if you'd like, finding an activation of the muscles in the back of the throat. So it's the same muscles that you use when you're fogging up a mirror. It kind of creates that kind of sound. So it's that, but as you breathe in and out of the nose, it creates that beautiful oceanic sound, little whisper breath that you can connect to. So we're tuning into the physical sensations in the body, we're tuning into the breath, and we're really just allowing ourselves to let go, to really settle into this space. Just kind of letting whatever thoughts arise, just kind of be there and then float away, not really investing anything in those thoughts, just letting them be. And if it would feel good, starting to walk the knees out a little wider, you may be able to just come down onto the forearms and move over, take the knees out, or you can come up, raising the upper body up, taking the knees out wider, and then resettling into your child's pose. But just starting to get a little more opening through the hips, creates a little more space for the belly to drop down towards the earth. You may find a little more length through the low back, maybe a release of compression there. And we're taking this nice and slow for our first pose as we just connect to the breath and check in to see how we're feeling, how we are coming to our mat today in this practice. And we really just want to tune into the body, not force anything. Everything that I say is simply suggestions. And I try to give you enough options to where you can kind of play around within your body, within your practice, to really just find what feels right for you. Your body and your intelligence, your intuition, that should be the ultimate guide of your practice. And, as teachers, we're just kind of here to hold space and to, help you come back to the present, help you come back to the breath. But it's really your journey, so you get to decide what you do when you do it. So just keep on tuning in, keep listening. Start to notice where you're feeling maybe a little different sensation. Maybe the toes or the feet are tingling. Maybe you've opened up a little more space that the body's been able to move into, or maybe you're still holding on to some tension that maybe you could take a few deep breaths, focusing on those areas and continuing to allow yourself to settle in. And if you'd like, if you want to take the knees a little bit wider, big toes will start to touch. Again, you could come up onto the forearms or raise the upper body up as you move the knees out a little wider. Notice if you come off of the mat, if you need to adjust, any cushion or anything. We really want to take care of those knees. So now the knees may be, much wider than the hips as the hips continue to lower back to the heels, but you can still have that blanket or some sort of cushion resting on the calves to create a little support behind the knees if that would feel better, or staying up in the puppy pose with the hips raised. Again, if you took the knees a little bit wider, you may have noticed a little more space for the belly to drop. You may be feeling a little bit more through the low back, maybe down into the hips, into the glutes. Just continue to check in. Take a few more rounds of breath here. Connecting to the breath. As you feel ready, we're gently going to start to come out of our child's pose. Coming up towards hands and knees, so maybe starting to walk the hands back, and if the knees were out wide, starting to walk them in. And coming up through a tabletop or through hands and knees. Just kind of taking time to find a good position for the hands where you can find a solid connection. Knees kind of underneath the hips, or maybe a little wider, a little more narrow, whatever feels better for you there. And then just take any movements that would feel good here, just kind of waking up after our kind of static hold. Maybe some circles through the hips. Maybe you take some cat-cow, finding some rounding and arching through the spine. Maybe you wag your tail and take the gaze over each shoulder, finding some length in the side bodies. Just really tuning into the body, getting some movement through the joints. All right, now as you feel ready, we're going to step our right foot in between the hands. So, it may take a few steps to do that. You can even use your hands to physically place that foot. And we're going to walk the foot forward, so we're in a low lunge. So we're keeping that back knee down. But pay attention, if you don't have padding underneath the knee, maybe you want to bring some in. But you can also kind of, as you plant the knee, scooch forward a little bit so that you're putting the weight right above the kneecap, that little fleshy, meaty part that we've all got, so that we're not putting direct pressure on the kneecap. You can also bring in blocks or, your cushions, something to bring the ground in closer here. If, reaching towards the ground isn't an option, you can even bring the hands up towards the knee to kind of raise up. You can hold on to, the side of a table or a couch if you're at home. So we're just looking to get a nice opening through the left hip flexor. And we don't want to drop that hip down. We want the hips to stay pretty squared. So we've got the right foot planted, and the knee is either in line with the ankle or slightly behind. And then we're drawing the hip bone back. And that kind of tucks it in as well, so there might be a little hugging in through the hips. As the right hip draws back, we want that left hip to kind of shift forward so that the pelvis is in line. And then as a whole, if you want to move forward, then the hip girdle, nice and squared, can start to shift forward as you open up a little more into that hip flexor. So again, hands can be wherever feels good, on the knee, up on the hips. They can be reaching down towards the ground or towards a prop. And maybe, a little forward and back movement here. Just feeling into that opening in the hip. Awesome work. We won't be here for too much longer. Just a few more rounds of breath. Awesome, and then we're just simply going to switch it out. So we're going to bring, actually before we do that, let's take a runner's lunge, or half splits. So we'll shift the hips back, nice little counter stretch. Sorry about the fake out there. So walking the hands back, again the hands could come, where's my block? This is a nice place that you can bring blocks in, or again, you can use the hands on a table. So we want to find length through this leg. We're still drawing that right hip bone back, and we're flexing through the toes. So the toes are pointing up towards the sky, and that activates up through the shin. And then it's your choice. The more you fold forward, the more sensation you're going to get. You might start to feel a little pull through the hamstring, through the low back. So you can play with that. You can even play with pointing and flexing through the toes. That can kind of play with the sensation as well. As you point, takes it kind of down into the ankle. Awesome work. All right, now we're gonna switch it out. So go ahead and take that right foot all the way back. And then we're just gonna step the left foot forward. So again, taking your time, however you need to make that transition. Hands can be a great assist there to place that foot. And then again, let's play with the squaring of the hips. So we're having that right hip drawing back. There might be a little squeezing in of the hips as we engage in the inner thighs. And then with the hips nice and squared, that whole hip girdle can start to shift forward. Staying in tune with the knee. Again, if, as how I just set this up moving forward, I can definitely tell that I'm putting a lot of weird pressure on the kneecap. So it might even be nice to lift the knee and slightly step it back so that you can find that little fleshy, meaty part. Again, just so that we're not putting direct pressure on the knee joint, right on that kneecap. So getting that nice stretch through the right hip flexor. And your choice if you're up looking forward, if the hands are on the knee, or if you're in more of a bow forward. And finding your breath, listening to the body. And if it isn't feeling good on that back knee, you can plant the foot and lift that back knee up. It's just a little more active of a pose for a restore class, but you're definitely welcome to take that. If you want to give your knee a little bit of a break, we'll be here for just about 3 or so more rounds of breath. Awesome work. And then when you feel ready, we'll take it into that half lunge, or half lunge, half split. So starting to straighten through that front leg, shifting the hips back. And you can choose if you want to stay upright. Hands could be on blocks, they could be on a chair, table, couch, something along those lines. You could bow it forward if that feels good. And even though the leg is straight, we're not locking out into the knees, so we want a little bit of softness there. And we want the toes to be active, so starting just having the toes flexed back, pointing up towards the sky, activating through that lower leg. And then if you do choose to bow forward, just staying in tune with the sensations you start to feel through the hamstring, through the glutes, up into the low back. You may even start to pull it in the neck and shoulders. You can play with pointing and flexing through the toes if you want to kind of play with some sensation there. But either way, keeping the foot, the toes nice and active, breathing, feeling into the body, just for a couple more rounds of breath. Awesome work. And when you're ready, we're just gonna step that left foot back. And then let's see. No, that's not gonna work. Okay, let's come to a seat. So just sitting on either side of the hips, swinging the legs around, and just have some space back behind you to lie back. But we're not gonna lie back quite yet. So we're gonna continue exploring some hip action here. So we are going to come into a fire log. So what can be nice, especially if you have a tighter low back or tight hamstrings, is to prop the booty up. So sitting on a blanket. Sometimes the bolster can be a little too tall, but just again, it kind of depends on where your body is. So this lifting of the pelvis just helps you to give a little more space to tilt the pelvis forward, which kind of frees up a little more room, in the legs and in the hip socket. So if you're like me and have really tight hips, any kind of forward folding or any kind of action on the ground, it's nice to kind of lift the booty. So fire log. So it's kind of like crisscross applesauce, but on crack. So just a little bit more extreme. So we're gonna start with the left leg, toes flex back. And then you're going to cross the right knee on top of the right foot on top of the left knee. And we do want to work with squared hips here. So You can see, how high my knee is. There's a lot of space here. Some people will have less space. Some people can stack knees, knee to foot. So yeah, just kind of meet yourself where you are. If you do have a big space here and it's kind of strenuous, then you can bring in some props here to kind of fill that in. It's where a block can come in handy. And we want to keep the toes active, nice and flexed back, and we want to continue to root down towards the sits bones. That's our nice squared base. So that's really what we're focusing on. We're not worried, like how much space is here, or if you can, we're not looking to create any certain shape. We're really looking to get that squaring through the hip so you have that nice solid base, and then working your way into, this hip opener. And if this is just not happening for you, then you can start with cow face. So you cross both legs, the knees work to kind of stack, and this is going to bring a little more sensation in the hips. Well, I guess it kind of depends on the body. So yeah, this is a little more gentle option. You're not putting weight directly down on the kneecaps, or on the knee joints. So we're either in our cow face pose, legs crossed, knees working to stack, again, not necessary, or in our fire log, ankles and knees in line, toes active, and regardless of where we are, our main focus is rooting down towards the sits bones. And then just find some softness in the upper body. Notice if you're tensing up through the shoulders or in the neck, maybe a little bit of neck action here, maybe some circles through the head, or just nodding the head yes and no, side to side. If you have tension in the jaw, maybe licking the lips and kind of rubbing the bottom jaw across the top and loosening up through the jaw. And really focus on the breathing. Notice if you started to slump down and kind of start to hunch over, lengthen up, root down through the sits bones, and use that to sit up nice and tall. If you are, in your living room and near a couch or something or a wall, you can use that. You can sit up against the wall. That can be a nice support as well. A few more rounds of breath here. Awesome work. As you feel ready, slowly start to uncross the legs. You can bring in the hands for some support. Just uncross, lengthen through the legs, shake them out. Do whatever would feel good here between sides. Maybe you come back on the hands, plant the feet. You can take some windshield wipers side to side. Whatever feels good, shake them out, stomp on the ground, whatever would feel good here. Taking your time, and then we'll just switch out to the other side. So again, we're looking for sensation on the outside of the hips. So I'm going to get us into this a different way. You can, kind of use one side as a gauge if you want to do cow face or fire log, but we're going to start from fire log. So this time we're going to have the right foot down first, left foot's going to cross over. So coming into cow face, you're working to get the knees kind of drawing together, but really you want to keep the toes flexed, nice and active, and the sits bones rooted. So there might be a tendency to kind of lift that left hip up, really ground it down, root it down. Find that nice square base through the hips, lengthen up, breathe into those hips. So this is one option if you want to stay in cow face, or you can take it into fire log, where it's kind of the same shape, you're just opening up through the legs a little more. So you're sliding and stacking ankles over knees. So you've got the left ankle on top of the right knee. And again, some people might have a lot of space here. You can fill that in with props. if you would like. Some people that have more open hips, will not have so much space there. But again, the most important thing is that rooting down through the hips, that lengthening up through the spine. So again, we're not slouching forward. We are stacking vertebrae on vertebrae. Lengthening up, relaxing in the shoulders, relaxing in the face. Again, if maybe some neck rolls or shoulder rolls, or even a little self-massage, give yourself a little love. Anything that you want to do with the upper body, feel free to explore. Allowing yourself to breathe and be present to the sensations in the body, but don't let all of the energy and all of the attention go into the hips. Definitely be aware of that energy and notice, what's coming up. If this is feeling really good, if this is feeling like a release, if you're feeling really angry, if you want to turn off this video and walk away, if you want to, say 4-letter words at the screen at me, just notice. Notice how you're feeling. Notice what comes up. And try not to get too attached. Try not to feed any energy into those things. Just kind of be curious, like, that's happening, interesting. Breathe into the sensation, but listen to the body. The nervous system will tell you if you're going too deep, if you're about to be injured. Awesome work. Whenever you feel complete on this side, and again, just use the hands if you'd like to help uncross. A little assistance there might be nice as we hold poses. Sometimes the joints can get a little stiff, or as we kind of block circulation and then re-release. Kind of different sensations, so just feel into that. Shake it out or stretch it out. Again, maybe if you want to take some windshield wipers. Let's actually, everyone do that. If you're sitting on a prop, go ahead and remove that, just so that you can get a nice solid connection down to the sits bones. And so you can kind of, as the knees go side to side, you may be able to start to feel as you press down into the glutes and in towards the sits bones, you might hit like a little sweet spot, or like, it's a massage. It's like using the ground to kind of release. So as you move the knees side to side, if you find those sweet spots, feel free to kind of explore that. It can even be nice if you want a little more pressure to kind of lift the feet up and maybe do some circles, or just, again, just using the ground for self-massage through the glutes, through the outer hips. So that's one option. Or, even just those windshield wipers, if you take it nice and slow, you can kind of fill into that. So it's kind of like what you would do similar to a foam roller, just without the foam roller. If you want to get really intense, you can do this on like a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball or something like that, to get really pinpointed. Okay, and then when you're ready, we're just going to take it all the way down to the ground. So however you'd like to get there, however you want to lie down, make sure that you are still on your mat. And we've got the feet planted. Start to walk the heels in towards the glutes. And maybe you lift through the pelvis and tuck through the tailbone. Then just start to draw the right knee in towards the chest and the left knee. Bringing the hands to the tops or the outsides of the knees. And then if it would feel good, rocking side to side, or maybe taking some circles through the knees. And again, kind of same concept here, is pressing the pelvis, the low back into the mat, into the ground, and using the ground as a little self-massage.
Awesome work. Making your way back towards neutral. And then with the hands on the outsides of the knees, flex the toes back so that they're nice and active. And then keeping the ankles and the knees in line, we'll just start to open up through the knees. So the hands can start to gently guide the knees open. Toes stay flexed back as we come into a reclined frog pose. Now sometimes for me, a little shifting through the hips can kind of find a little more space, a little more opening. So toes stay flexed back, hands can rest on the knees, or we're going to add just a little bit of weight for gravity to work with. We're not necessarily cranking down on the knees or, forcing the feet any wider. We're just kind of helping gravity out a little bit. Keep the toes nice and flexed, nice and active. So this is kind of a similar shape to if you took the wide leg child's pose at the beginning, other than the feet are not touching. The feet are separated, flexed back, heels pretty close to in line with the ankles or knees still. Awesome. Just a few more rounds of breath. And when you're ready, we're going to take this into a happy baby. So we're keeping the toes flexed back, the knees in line with the feet. And we're going to start to draw the knees in towards the armpits, and the feet extend up towards the sky, but the knees are still bent. So feet flexed back, knees bent, knees drawing in towards armpits. And the hands can come in. They can grab behind the knees, anywhere up the legs, or they can grab the outsides of the feet, helping you to kind of drive the knees down. You lengthen through the low back, maybe even press the pelvis down. And getting opening in the hips. And if it would feel good, maybe a little rocking side to side, you could extend one leg out and then the other. Just finding whatever feels good. This pose looks really silly, but it feels really good. Just imagine a little baby playing in its crib. Channel that inner child. Awesome work. When you feel ready, we'll release the feet, lowering the feet down towards the ground. You stay bent. Now the next pose we're going to get into, we're going to do pigeon pose. So it's your choice if you want to stay on your back and do a reclined pigeon. That's going to be a more gentle option on the hips and on the knees. It's not going to add as much, takes away the pressure of gravity. Or you can come up to a seated position, start to come into hands and knees to set up a pigeon pose. So first I'll walk through pigeon on the back, reclined pigeon. So again, we're getting sensations. We're looking for a stretch on the outside of the hip. So for reclined pigeon, we'll extend the right toes up, flex the toes back, and then turn those toes out, and then cross that right ankle over the left knee. Opening up through that right knee, the right hand could come to the thigh. If that feels good, you can stay here, maybe a little side to side movement. Or for more sensation, you could start to draw the left knee in towards the chest, flexing the right toes back. Hands could interlace behind the knee, or you could rest that foot on the ground. And then options for exploring here, a little side to side rocking, right elbow to right knee, or continue to drawing left knee towards left shoulder. So this is one option for a reclined pigeon. If you want to take a half pigeon, from not reclined position, I am going to walk you through one using props, because I think that can really help you to get proper alignment with the hips. So this is where you may want to have a bolster or a cushion, some sort of like stack of pillows or a bigger rolled up blanket so that we can, the idea here is to create a little cushion for the whole hip girdle. So we're going to be doing our pigeon pose over the cushion or the bolster. So you're going to swing the right leg forward. I like to have blocks or something in front as well, and I'll explain that why. And then we bring the right toes over towards the left side of the mat. As we shift forward, the right knee drops down over towards the right. We want to keep the right toes flexed back. And the more of like a parallel line you have of the shin to the front of the mat, the more intense the stretch is going to be. That's not necessary, so if it feels better, bring that right knee more forward. What's most important here is, again, we're working with squared hips. So like we did in our lunging that we did, we want to draw the right hip back, left hip forward. So that that left leg is shooting out directly behind us. So the hips are nice and squared, and we've got some activity there. So you can also imagine trying to draw the knees together like you're trying to squish the mat in between the knees. So we've got that drawing back of the right hip. Left hip is shifting forward, but you're also getting a nice opening through that left hip flexor and a nice stretch through the hips. So I like to have the block here, because you can play up in king pigeon, a little more active back bending here. You know, maybe you work a little bit with that. You can start to kick the heel towards the glute if that's a little something you want to play with. Or you can start to bow forward towards a humble pigeon, and I like to have the blocks there to kind of fill in space so that I don't go too deep too soon. So, you know, I can kind of play up here, and then as time and space allows, maybe I start to lower my elbows down towards the ground. You know, some people may be a little more flexible and fold all the way forward. What we want to avoid is just collapsing into the pose that I've heard referred to as dead pigeon. We don't want any dead pigeons here. So we want that activity in the hips. So even if you're bowed forward in this humbling pose, you're still drawing that right hip back. You're still grounding that left hip down. So the hips are nice and squared and there's activity there. And that's really important for people who are hypermobile, especially in the hips, that you don't need to build flexibility around those joints, you need to build support. So as we work these deep stretches, if you activate, that helps to build support around those joints instead of just exploiting the joints and their flexibility. So keep that level of activity. And whichever pose you're in, whether you're in a regular half pigeon or reclined pigeon on the back, start to tune into the neck and into the shoulders. Notice if you're clenching in the jaw or scouring the brow. Notice if you can release through the tongue and soften anywhere in the upper body. There is a lot of strength and exploration to be found in holding poses, but also, tune into the body. We don't want to hold the pose to a point, where it's causing damage, or, to where you have to hold the breath. We want to have sensation. We want to, kind of find our body's edge and play with that edge, but we don't want to push it too far. So especially as we hold poses for a long time, there's a tendency to get a release and an opportunity to maybe move a little deeper into a pose. And sometimes that's not the best choice for the body. So we want to continue to check in. We'll take about 5 more rounds of breath here. So just notice if for these last few rounds you can release, relax, let something go. you feel ready, releasing out of whichever pose you're in, nice and slow. And then taking any counter stretches, any counter movements between sides. So if you're up in our half pigeon, you can swing that back leg forward. You could scooch that back leg forward and plant the hands, maybe come up to a downward dog, or pedal through the feet if that doesn't, feel counterintuitive to a restorative pose. If you're on the back, you can release the feet down, maybe take a few rounds of windshield wipers or knees into the chest. You can stretch out in a big good morning stretch. Really any movements between sides, noticing, you probably feel a difference between the left hip and the right hip. Taking as much time in between sides as you'd like, and then whenever you feel ready, starting to set up our pigeon pose on the other side. So again, you can kind of use both sides as a guideline, but don't feel like you have to do the same. If you did recline pigeon on one side, that you can't do, half pigeon on the other, or vice versa. Definitely listen to your body. So again, recline pigeon on the back. We're extending the left toes up towards the sky, flexing the toes back, getting that external rotation first, and then crossing that ankle over. Opening up through the right knee, and you've got the choices. You can keep the feet planted on the ground. The left hand could gently press that thigh open. You could start to draw the right knee towards the chest, getting more sensation in that left hip. Hands could interlace behind the knee. And then you have all those options for exploration, maybe some side-to-side rocking, left elbow to left knee gently pressing open, or gently drawing right knee towards right shoulder. So option 1 is this reclined pigeon. Option 2 is our half pigeon with the assistance of bolster, cushion, pillows, big blanket, whatever it is that you've got. So taking that left leg, swinging it over, bringing the left foot over towards the right side of the mat, and then sending the left knee over towards the left. Working on squaring through the hips first, so drawing that left hip back, right hip shifts kind of forward and down. The left toes are flexed back. Again, you can play with the angle of the shin for whatever feels good there. I like to have my knee a little more forward, so it kind of creates like a 7 or, But we want that activity. So that right leg is shooting out directly behind us so that that right hip is nice and squared. Left hip drawing back, or again, imagine trying to squeeze like the knees together and scrunching up the mat. So nice and active in the hips. What we want to avoid is just dropping in and sinking into that left hip. So we have it nice and active, nice and squared. And I like to have that prop at the front just to kind of play if you want. Definitely not necessary. You can kind of play up in king pigeon, working a little more back bending. Be aware of the low back here. You could kick the heel in towards the glute. There's all sorts of crazy things you can do back there, but I don't do that. Feel free if you do. Or you can find a humble pigeon. Start to find a little forward folding, taking it nice and slow. Again, that's why I like to have the prop, is to gradually lower myself down towards the earth so that I can continue to check in with the hips and keep them nice and active so that I don't collapse down into a dead pigeon, disengage through the hips, and start to exploit those joints. So just trying to help you safely create a little more flexibility. If that's what you're looking for, and if you have that flexibility already, again, like I said, if you're hypermobile, super flexible in the hips, then you don't need to work on flexibility, you need joint stability. So this activation is going to help with that too, help you to not exploit those joints, and just help, have a little safety net around them. Taking a few more deep rounds of breath. Again, just checking in with the face, the neck, the shoulders. Softening where you can. Checking in with the breath and really using the breath to work through the uncomfortability that this pose can bring up. This pose can also release some emotions or even just, hip openers in general. Hips are a very common place where we store emotions, traumas, pent-up energy. So sometimes there can be a release, and we may feel things that we weren't expecting or that we didn't know were there. So, if that comes up, if you notice that and it's something that, you can easily let go of, then just let it go. And if it's something surprising that needs some work to do that you don't have the time and space, in this moment to work on, then just vow to deal with it in a healthy way when you have the time and capacity to do so. Oh, a few more rounds of breath here. Softening in the neck, softening around the eyes, releasing in the jaw and the tongue. Awesome work. Whenever you feel ready, take your time. Just start to, as you feel complete on this side. And just gently come out of the pose, again, however works for you. Taking any counter stretches, any movements, anything that would feel fantastic right now. The last pose I'm going to get us into before our Shavasana, it's going to be a hip opener, of course, sticking with the theme. It's going to be reclined cobbler's pose, and I'll show you a bunch of different ways you can do this with props. My favorite way is to combine this with a heart opener, which you can do flat on the ground. You can definitely do this without props. I'll show you ways that you can do it with props. So, without props, basically what we're doing, we're coming to the back. I want a little tuck through the tailbone, bringing the bottoms of the feet to touch and letting the knees drop open. And then a little tuck of the shoulder blades to open up through the chest. So this is kind of, the shape, kind of what we're looking for. So you're welcome to take this as is. If you have some compression in the low back, maybe bring a little more arching into the back to activate through the thoracic spine and kind of pull some of that tension out of the low back. So this is without props. If you do want to bring in some props, one nice thing to do is to support the knees. So you can do that with blocks or books, something, to kind of just fill in that space there. You can also slide your bolster, cushions, rolled up blanket. You could slide that in between the knees. Or beneath the knees for some support there. You could also lower your support to bring the feet up onto a prop so that the heels are a little more in line with the hips. That can help to bring some release to the low back. And then my favorite way to do this, like I said, is to add the heart opener. So you can do it just on the ground, opening through the chest, shoulder blades drawing back. Or you can take it a little bit further by just bringing a little lift, a little space between you and the ground for the spine. So however high you want it to be, the bolster is pretty high. You can use a cushion, again, rolled up towel or blanket, but you want it to be about the length of the spine, and if it's not, then you want to be able to bring in something to support the head. So however, you can kind of play with the arch in the low back. And so what this does is it just gives that lift in the back of the heart so that you have more space to drop the shoulders back and down. So it really opens up through the chest, opens up through the heart. And you don't need that extra lift in the back of the heart, but it can feel nice. So however you want to set this up. Palms can be alongside the body, palms turned up. They can be out, arms can be stretched out. If that feels a little too much, this is pretty exposed, just can feel pretty vulnerable. If it would feel better to have a little more containment, you can bring, one hand to the heart, one hand to the belly. You could cross the arms, grabbing opposite elbows, biceps, or shoulders. If that would feel better, feel free to, kind of bring in a little more containing. If that feels more safe, because this is definitely vulnerable. Eye on the back, hips open, heart open. So as long as it's not going to cause any physical harm, and as long as it's not going to trigger, any deep-rooted traumas that I wouldn't be there to help you work through. If it's just, those things we want to avoid. But if it's just uncomfortable, if it's just feeling a little vulnerable, then just stick with that. For some people, it's going to feel amazing, and they're going to want to sleep in this pose. I don't recommend it. I have fallen asleep in this pose. It doesn't feel very good when you wake up. But ultimately, just find what feels good for you. Teetering that balance of pushing the limits while still staying safe. Testing ourselves. To be in the openness. Feel free to stay here as long as you'd like. We will start to make a transition towards Shavasana, or our final pose, but you're welcome to stay here for that if this is feeling awesome. When you are ready to come out, it's nice to bring the hands to the outsides of the thighs and offer the hips a little assistance to draw the knees together. And then take as much time as you'd like to wrap up, to do any final poses, any final stretches, anything that the body's craving. Putting layers of clothes on, maybe finding a blanket to wrap up in, and then, just figuring out what position would feel best for you for your Shavasana, for your final relaxation pose. Traditional corpse pose is just on the back, palms turned up, toes turned out. If that doesn't feel awesome, a nice way to use props is to slide a bolster, cushions, some sort of rolled up blanket underneath the knees. That can help to relieve any joint pain in the knees, as well as some compression in the low back. You can use props to support you in any way, and if lying on the back isn't gonna be awesome for you right now, then lie on your side, lie on your belly. You could take another child's pose like how we started. You could even come to a seated meditation or take a seat in a chair or on your couch. But we take this time at the end of every yoga practice to take a shavasana, some sort of representation of this surrendering that is necessary on our mats and off our mats, but is something that is super hard to do. So our yoga practice gives us the opportunity to practice surrender. And the idea of the surrendering to the moment, surrendering to the magic that's happening, because we've just put forth a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of intention. And that those things need time to go to work. They need time to start to attract, And so this is that space, this is that time where all of the good work that we've just done starts to integrate into the mind, into the body, as we release the mind and the body. As we give it time and space to just be. And this is an important lesson to take off the mat. To know when it's time to work hard, to work with intentions, to put that energy out into the world. And then when is it time to surrender and let all of those things that you've just done go to work for you. It's in these moments of surrender that the true magic happens. The real shifts can happen. And if nothing else, just a little moment of inner peace. Releasing the breath, releasing the body. Allow yourself to surrender to your surroundings. Allowing any noises or external stimulation to be a part of the process, a part of the experience, not taking anything away, but adding to the realness of this moment. Allowing everything and everyone as they are right now to just be.
those of you at home, if you do have more time to dedicate to this final pose, please give yourself that gift. At least 5 more minutes, if not upwards to 20. As you all feel ready, just gently starting to bring a little movement back into the body. If you're lying down, gently starting to roll over to one side of the body if you're not already there. Wherever you find yourself, just pause for a moment and offer yourself some gratitude. Gratitude for taking this time to step on your mat, to put in the work, to move, breathe, and connect, and to just be. As you feel ready, if you're not already there, just gently press your way back up to a comfortable seat. I'll invite you to bring the hands to heart center or take any other meaningful gesture with the hands. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this beautiful yoga practice with you this evening. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I see you, I honor you, and I bow to you. Namaste.